What's the worst cult you've heard of? Scientology. It's part cult, part MLM scam. They are flat out criminals who require the one thing common to cults: shunning of family members who don't toe the line or who reject the faith. We're talking about ripping families apart. It's flat out evil. And when it comes to dealing with people who question their practices, they use lawyers and private investigators to harass and intimidate people who speak out. Hell, they were so vicious in their harassment of ICE agents that were pursuing a case against their tax-exempt status that the ICE basically gave up. They are scum, and if you patronize the movies of the many Hollywood celebs who are members, you are supporting them. Tom Cruise is not just a blind follower, he is a major player. Don't see his movies. There is an award-winning documentary, Lee Remini, Scientology and the Aftermath. If you haven't seen it, you should. Jonestown. It was really messed up and tragic. Over 900 people passed, including children. While there are a plenty of cults guilty of abhorrent things, and those are the worst, I want to throw many of the MLMs into the mix here. They are so egregious because they are incredibly wide-reaching. The business model preys on those in financial hardship, yet only ultimately puts most in further debt. The essential oil ones are also so bad because they eschew real medicine in favor of using the oils. I have seen a thread with 20+ people telling a mother asking what to do for her child with a fever to put peppermint oil on their feet, not to use fever reducers or seek the help of a pediatrician / qualified medical personnel. It's hard for me to say that it was the worst because I'm certainly biased. However, the cult that I found myself trapped in at 15, my mother tricked me into visiting them and I was immediately trapped, which was spawned from the Synanon cult, left me with complex PTSD and has left wounds which are still unhealed. Straight Incorporated. The cult I was held in against my will was derived from Synanon Point. By the time Straight was in operation, the abusive tactics which Synanon had modeled after the Korean brainwashing techniques used against US troops in the 50s had been fine-tuned, and we were subjected to them 24/7. This all took place in a warehouse in an industrial park, where I was held captive for a little over 2 years. I believe the most evil aspect was in order to advance to the next phase of the program, which granted more freedoms. Initially, you are forced to spend the majority of the day seated rigid in a chair, silent while being indoctrinated through physical / psychological abuse. Every child was required to subject the other children and the group to humiliating and often inhuman abuses. As you can probably imagine, it makes support groups almost impossible. The cult was disguised as a drug rehab. However, if you were unlucky enough to be admitted there, you were staying whether you has a problem with substance abuse or not. Many of the children trapped there had never even touched illegal substances. However, it would be determined they were at risk of future drug abuse and therefore trapped nevertheless. It was a money-making scheme to fleece parents who were often looking for someone else to deal with the raising of unwanted children. Once children graduated, often years later, they would work on staff at a new location for minimum wage. It was well thought out, and I hope there is an especially loathsome corner of hell reserved for those responsible for stealing my and others' childhoods and leaving us to struggle the rest of our lives with the debilitating effects of the abuse we suffered. MAGA. Those Trump supporters are so unbelievably stupid or evil. I have absolutely no explanation how you can think of Trump as a stable genius. Problem is, stupid people in large groups are dangerous. January 6th proved that. The Westboro Baptist Church, not even because of their beliefs, but because of how they act on them. They claim to be a church, that is, to have all the usual trappings of a church, but when you see them out in the world, they are basically a cult of misfits, some of whom are not even Christians, and most of whom have very odd beliefs of their own, with a huge following. For example, as long as a few years ago they started a campaign to protest funerals that had military members in them, and the strangest thing is that they are pretty much on the fringe, yet somehow seem to be popular among Christians. They use every method of argumentation possible to try and make people feel bad about themselves and their lives, and to try and force them into some form of conformity. To top it all off, they have a lot of connections in high places in government, and yes, they are connected with the government. The reason they are so active is that they believe there is a war coming. My grandmother taught at a tiny school district outside of Waco. The Branch Davidian kids went to school there, She told me she always got an uneasy feeling from the girls specifically. She didn't have any solid proof to do any mandatory reporting though. I'm going to say Branch Davidians. My family. Yesterday they married off my girl relative by force. Because it's a third world country there's nothing to do. I cried my butt off. So what to do? My tears won't make a difference anyway. But I won't forget it. I will never forget this event. They will have to pay. I promise. As I'm reading this and watching people debate what makes something a cult, I want to put out some important information from the Ike's list, but it was initially published through association with the Can, before it was all Scientology-ish. Here is a list of characteristics that they find to be present in cults. They are not exclusive to cults. The group is focused on a living leader to whom members seem to display excessively zealous, unquestioning commitment. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. The group is preoccupied with making money. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. Mind-numbing techniques, such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, debilitating work routines, are used to suppress doubts about the group and its leader or leaders. The leadership dictates sometimes in great detail how members should think, act, and feel. For example, members must get permission from leaders to date, change jobs, get married. Leaders may prescribe what types of clothes to wear, where to live, how to discipline children, and so forth. The group is elitist, claiming a special, exalted status for itself, its leader or leaders, and members. For example, the leader is considered the messiah or an avatar. The group and/or the leader has a special mission to save humanity. The group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which causes conflict with the wider society. The group's leader is not accountable to any authorities, as are, for example, military commanders and ministers, priests, monks, and rabbis of mainstream denominations. The group teaches or implies that its supposedly exalted ends justify means that members would have considered unethical before joining the group. For example, collecting money for bogus charities. The leadership induces guilt feelings in members in order to control them. Members' subservience to the group causes them to cut ties with family and friends, and to give up personal goals and activities that were of interest before joining the group. Members are expected to devote inordinate amounts of time to the group. Members are encouraged or required to live and/or socialize only with other group members. And here are some things that are of particular concern. If you recognize these characteristics in a group you are a part of, you should be concerned. The group is led by a one or a few individuals, charismatic, determined, domineering. The leader or leaders are self-appointed and claim to have a special mission in life. Frequently, that mission is messianic or apocalyptic. Leaders answer to no higher authority, such as an oversight board. They are sole interpreters of doctrine and policy, which may change frequently and whimsically. The group centers its veneration on the leader or leaders directly, rather than on God, a higher political power, science, or whatever. The group structure is hierarchical and authoritarian. Rarely will you find an open election in a cult. The group tends to be totalitarian, with elaborate rules and rituals that occupy large parts of every day. To break a rule or ignore a ritual carries a danger of expulsion from the group. The group usually has two or more sets of ethics, one for the leadership, another for the membership, one for outsiders, another for insiders, a relaxed set for recruiting purposes, a much more demanding set for the committed member. The group usually presents itself as innovative and exclusive, even elitist. The group has two main purposes: recruiting new members and fundraising. It's unlikely to support or even encourage legitimate charity work, except as a front for recruitment.